In 1981, the USA had launched a mission to colonize a planet that's full of life. Eventually, in the year 2002, they found a planet named BOREAS. In 2015, multiple research stations have been placed there. And today, we are making this documentary in order to inform people on the life on this planet. Let's dive into the history and the evolution of the animals on the planet BOREAS, planet of winter lords. But first, let's dive into the solar system. What is it about? Because every world needs a solar system to help give life on it. The F-star that BOREAS orbits is known as Prometheus, which has a mass of 1.30, radius of 1.15, and its temperature is around 6,100 degrees. BOREAS is normally about 1 degree Celsius. Its radius is 1.25, mass 1.05, gravity and density are 1.25, and its AU is 3.65, making it very cold but still habitable enough to host life. BOREAS' atmosphere has 76% nitrogen, 20% O2, 2% CO2, and 1.5% H2O with 0.5% other gases. It has a 25-degree axial tilt, which will make seasons very, very diverse, but it'll still keep a theme of being very cold and oftentimes snowy. It has 28 hours a day and 564 days per year, so it takes a long time to finish the days and the years that BOREAS has. The continents on BOREAS are known as Taiga, Elfore, and Torsen. Despite this planet's very cold atmosphere, it's still very moist and very wet, oftentimes having a lot of precipitation going on, as rainfall is very common on this world. What's even more common, however, is the snowfall. There is a lot of snow going onto this planet. They're oftentimes very long and very harsh too. BOREAS has about 2 moons, which are very similar to ours, with one being way smaller than the other. They both contribute to BOREAS' very, very strong tidal waves, often making the water impossible to swim in properly. Because of this, most BOREAS creatures would often not evolve to swim in the oceans. The only times they would evolve to swim would be in freshwater ecosystems where the currents are less harmful and wouldn't graze them across rocks and rip them apart. Now that we got that down, let's explore the best part about BOREAS, the life on it. Here we have the Grunschnecke. The Grunschnecke is a filter-feeding carnivore that lives in the deepest parts of the ocean. They're the ancestors of most animal equivalents on the planet. They have 4 limbs used to dig into the sand, which protects them from the harsh waves this ocean has to offer. They have a long proboscis to peep out of the sand so they can suck in the spores that the plant equivalents produce. They have a blue flap, which is a gill that absorbs dissolved oxygen in order to be processed for the cells to use as energy. They have a hard shell, which protects them from whenever they get stuck in the said currents, and they are tossed around, hitting rocks one by one. The shell prevents them from being mutilated and torn apart, and oftentimes is very valuable, and often saves them from near-death experiences. The way the Grunschnecke reproduce is by using external fertilization, where a male will release sperm all over the female's eggs into the water. But not everybody is content with staying in the sand for long. Here we have the Curriculum testa. The Curriculum testa marches on the sea floor looking for plant life, as they are not content with feeding off only spores in the sand. They come out when the water is less harsh, and they have adapted their front claws in order to be more like mantis arms, pinning down plants that might actually unroot themselves in order to get away. They have a long, sharp proboscis now in order to feed off the sap the plants have, adapting their saliva in order to dissolve the plant's flesh and matter. The saliva actually has an ability to explode cell walls in order to make a nice soup, instead of having to eat the flesh and tear it apart, like most animals would on Earth. This will be a standout feature in most BOREAS organisms. Instead of having jaws, they would often have a trunk-like mouth or a proboscis in order to feed on local animal life or the plants. The plant equivalents of the planet are not really interesting to talk about, as they photosynthesize, But there are some stuff that is in the early stages. Some of these plants have the ability to unroot themselves from the ground. While this wouldn't carry on to their descendants, this was a feature they had due to their worm-like relatives they shared with the Grunschnecke. They would often unroot themselves in order to find better climates in order to thrive in. But a lot of the times they only escaped if they had to because of predatory creatures like the Curriculum Testa, or to find breeding grounds that they can mate on. Speaking of breeding, they have 2 reproductive organs on the top of their heads, or quote-unquote heads. They would shoot out spores that would mate with other spores and be fertilized, and they would be shot back out again in order to land on the sea floor and then grow into the plants. This is something the Grunschneckes often feast upon, mainly the fertilized ones, but they can also eat the unfertilized ones. But the fertilized ones often have more energy inside of them. The plants have about 2 gigantic leaf-like organs that are used to glide away from dangers. The Dracoherba would end up becoming a large plant that's often tree-like and becoming almost the size of a human. They are very large organisms and often photosynthesize a lot, and they aren't eaten by the Curriculum Testa. The Hastaradix is a grass-like organism that would often be on the sea floor. They were parasitic and still kept their moving elements of them, often moving a lot, using their spear-like root in order to pierce the flesh of other organisms in order to feed on them. Though they didn't do this often, as they would always just photosynthesize. Later on, they may become something you wouldn't expect. Here is a simple size chart for the creatures. You can see how small they are in the early stages and how the Dracoherba is a very large organism. Here is the food web. You can see how the Curriculum Testa is considered the apex predator, though it isn't really a predator due to being a herbivore equivalent. That is all for the planet Boreas. I hope you guys had an enjoyable time watching this, as I also had an enjoyable time creating this and working for the research agency of Boreas. We hope to create more episodes of this documentary series, and we'll be back one day. But for now, we say bye. Have a good day.